A little 140 word a minute. OJ for voice, Mr. Blazier for the plaintiff, Mr. Lambert for the defense. Mr. Blazier is starting out in direct. Take it away.
Ready, begin. Ms. Mazzola, if you initialed the bindles that you processed on the morning of the 14th, and later on those bindles did not have your initials on them, that would indicate that they weren't the same bindles, correct?
Objection. Assumes facts not in evidence. Argumentative.
Sustained. You can argue that.
Now, you are sure that you made sure that those swatches were all dry at the time that you put them in bindles on the morning of the 14th, correct?
The ones that I had control over, yes.
And you learned later that at least one of the bindles, when it was opened later on, showed evidence of a wet transfer on the paper itself.
Objection. Calls for hearsay, Your Honor.
Are you aware of that?
Excuse me. Sustained.
Did you ever look at these bindles after they were prepared on the morning of the 15th?
No, I did not.
So you don't have any independent knowledge that the bindles that were later examined were the same ones that you guys fixed on the morning of the 14th?
Objection. Argumentative.
Prepared.
Assumes facts not in evidence.
You can rephrase that maybe.
You have no personal knowledge that the bindles that you and Dennis Fung prepared on the morning of the 14th were the same ones that were later examined by Colin Yamuchi?
Same objection. Still argumentative.
Overruled.
No, I do not.
Now, getting back to Mr. Simpson's reference blood, you were ordered at some point to change your paperwork to show that Mr. Simpson's reference blood should be item 17 rather than 18. Isn't that correct?
Mr. Fung told me the tennis shoes had been brought in by Detective Lang on the 14th and that they should be given the number later down the blood vial, what he received the day before.
Is the answer to my question yes? At some point you were directed to change the number for Mr. Simpson's reference blood from 18 to 17?
Correct.
And that was to eliminate the appearance that the blood had been kept overnight by Detective Van Adder. Isn't that correct?
Objection. Argumentative, Your Honor.
Overruled.
The tennis shoes were brought in after the blood, therefore they should have gotten a later number.
Of all of the items that you collected on the 13th and 14th, was there any other item that you were directed to change the number on other than Mr. Simpson's reference blood?
No.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Cross-examine.
Ms. Mazzola, you were asked a number of questions by Mr. Blazier about your testimony in August 1994. Do you remember that?
Yes.
That testimony wasn't during the actual criminal trial, was it?
No, it was not.
Was that during some preliminary hearing of some sort?
Yes.
And on that occasion, had you had an opportunity to prepare at all for that testimony?
No.
Had you had an opportunity to review your notes?
No.
Did you even have your notes with you?
No.
So you testified on that occasion without any preparation and without any notes. Is that right?
I did not have any personal notes. I borrowed Mr. Matheson's.
He didn't have all the same things that you have in your notes, did he?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
Did he have all the same things in his notes that you had in your notes?
No.
Objection.
Excuse me. There's an objection. Foundation. Sustained. Lay a foundation.
Did you look at Mr. Matheson's notes a little bit on the stand that day?
On the stand, yes.
Were his notes identical to your notes?
He was lacking one sketch.
And were you able, during your testimony, to completely review his set of notes to refresh your recollection about the events during the evidence collection?
Not while I was testifying, no.
Did you later discover that you had made some mistakes during your testimony because of your lack of preparation?
Objection, leading.
Overruled.
Yes.
Now, in regard to the collection of the evidence on Rockingham, Mr. Blazier asked you some questions about whether Mr. Fung was supervising you during every swatching of every piece of evidence that you swatched. He was present on the premises throughout the time you were working, wasn't he?
Yes, he was present.
And was there also another supervisor from SID present?
Towards the end, yes.
That was who?
Mr. Steve Johnson.
And what's his position at SID?
Assistant Laboratory Director.
And did he also supervise you, some of the work that you were doing or observed?
He watched me do one or two towards the end, yes.
And the actual swatching method that you used, using the little cotton swatches and distilled water and clean tweezers and so on, is that the same method that you're still using today?
Yes.
Have you changed it at all in any way since the time you collected the evidence at Bundy and Rockingham?
No.
You're now what level criminalist?
Criminalist 2.
And how many crime scenes have you processed since Bundy and Rockingham?
Objection, irrelevant.
Sustained.
The technique, the swatching technique that you used in that case, were you careful throughout the time that you did it?
Yes.
Same level of care that you've used on crime scenes since then?
Yes.
The questions were asked of you about whether you could specifically remember precisely when you changed your gloves and when you were processing the Bundy crime scene. Is it your recollection that you changed your gloves more than one time during that crime scene processing?
I know it was more than one time, but I can't give you a specific number.
Do you have a customer habit of changing gloves often during crime scene processing?
Okay.
All right.